Hello, friends, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Caught on the Mic. I'm your host, Michael Clark. Wow, what an episode I have in store for you today. My next guest has a very famous last name, but a very humble heart, and I have no problem saying this was one of my most favorite episodes to record to date. Randy Spelling, he is 1/3 of the hosts of one of my favorite podcasts, Oldish, where age-old questions meet new age answers. Randy is a life coach. He was a former actor himself. He also did some time on Beverly Hills 90210. But we talk a lot about the concept of time and coming to terms with our age and finding purpose in life. It's a fantastic conversation. I am so lucky to call Randy a friend. I think you guys will enjoy this episode. Make sure, if you're not already, that you follow Randy on social media. Make sure you follow Oldish Podcast as well. Randy Spelling joins me on Caught on the Mic today. As always, listener and viewer discretion is advised. Ladies and gentlemen, we are near the end of 2024. We all have those end of year perspectives. I like to listen to podcasts. I like to listen to audiobooks. I will shut my mind off in the gym and just indulge in the words of other people. My next guest is one of 3 hosts of a podcast dubbed the Love Line of the Modern Era, a show called Oldish. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend Randy Spelling is joining me on Caught on the Mic today. How are you, sir?
I'm so good. How are you today?
Oh, I am fantastic. Thank you so much for doing the podcast.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Great to sit down with you.
Yes. So how has your 2024 been?
Woo, that's a loaded question.
I know.
You know what's funny? I was just telling someone this earlier today. For 2 or 3 years, and not because it was an election year, I just felt intuitively that 2024 was going to be really big, really explosive. I didn't know if, it was going to be announced that like aliens exist or something, like big stuff, right?
Right.
Which, some of that's happening now.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I didn't insert myself into that year. I was like, I'm here. I help people. I work with people for a living. So I'll help people navigate this stuff. I didn't realize that personally, I was going to go through a lot too. And so I think it's just been a really difficult, challenging year for everybody. I mean, the economy is where the economy's at. Everything's expensive and more expensive.
Right.
And I think one of the biggest things that I would say that's very thematic is it feels like people are hitting this critical mass point. Whether it's in their relationships, whether it's in their finances, whether it's in their jobs, where they're like, I just can't do this anymore in the same way that I'm doing it, or they're meeting old patterns in themselves and they've just had enough. So what happens when you hit that critical mass is things start to break down. There's purpose in it, but damn, it is challenging.
Do you think it is the stress of all things going on that has led people to take that sense of personal inventory?
I think it has something to do with it.
Sure.
I think our environment matters, and the environment that we're in this year felt very much like a pressure cooker. You have the election stuff, and that seemed to just be a hijacking of everyone's attention for a very long time. And then it's just life in general. I mean, I don't know about you. We were chatting for a second before about, kids and whatnot. I mean, just our own personal lives could be a pressure cooker environment because things are so fast paced, and trying to hold on to a a modicum of connection and enjoyment and peace. It's like we're all kind of striving for that. And
Right.
yet it's harder than ever to land and stay in that sustainably.
Yeah, for sure. I put up a Facebook post the other day that, and it's kind of one of those dumb, duh statements, but that 2024 has moved faster for me than any other year of my lifetime. I feel like we were just making New Year's resolutions yesterday, and today we're kind of looking forward to this next year. And I spend a lot of time thinking about time. It's the greatest gift a person could give, because once you spend it, you can't get it back. So, how you spend it and how you invest that time, you have to do so wisely. So, it's a lot of perspective in such a short bubble. And I like to ask this question towards the end of the year just to see how somebody's feeling, how they've experienced the year, because it really is just dates on a calendar, because a new year can start any day you choose, realistically.
So true. Yeah. I like what you said about thinking more about time. And you're right. I've thought more about time and this year. And what's interesting is certain things that I held on to in previous years just didn't feel as important this year, or they morphed and changed, where I started to ask the question, how do I really want to spend my time? And, that it seems very different. Maybe it's an oldish thing and getting older,
Right.
And like the older you get, time changes. I asked my mother-in-law the other day, we were sitting on the couch and everyone was in bed. And we were having a beautiful conversation. And I got a chance to ask her, how do you experience time these days compared to how you did? Now, you're with your grandchildren, they're 13 and 11. And to hear how other people viewed time and viewed life 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 40 years ago, and how they view life now, I feel that we can learn so much in hearing those answers.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that the fact that you and I are the same exact age, do you think there's a little bit of a generational cause and effect that maybe we're both experiencing?
Yes.
Because I feel like we're coming to terms with mortality a lot more at this age than maybe we did even as little as 3-4 years ago, especially pre-pandemic.
Yes, I think there is some of that for sure. I mean, we are at the midlife crisis, existential conflict age where, you start to look at life as, if I'm lucky, I'm at the midway point.
Right.
I mean, potentially past, as life exists right now, and the average death rate, we're even a little bit past. So, yeah, I think there is some of that for sure, and it just gets me to come to a place of being more intentional. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think of, even when talking about this, I reference some of the great writers, and how they wrote about time, how they wrote about life. And I feel more in that era where I'm looking at things differently. And I really want to take time as if it were an orange and squeeze as much juice out of it as I can, because this year has passed you by quickly, has passed me by quickly. And we can't control time, but we can control how we relate to time and how we engage with it.
Yes. Man, that's fantastic. Well, now that we've kind of dove into the space-time continuum, if you will, let's talk a little bit about who you are, what you do. You spent many years in the world of acting, and then what was it, 2009? You made the move to being a life coach and moved to Oregon. Is that about the right
Correct.
timeline?
Yeah, you got it.
Woo! Look at me go. So let's talk about that pathway for you. What led you to make that transition and brought you to where you're at right now?
So, what I had no idea growing up that I was going to do what I do now for a living as a career. I sort of figured I was going to be in the entertainment business. That was the family business,
Right.
and I was in it until about 27 around. But for me, it was always how to fit in. And I was trying to find myself through where I fit into this world. And I would say I was more of a shy kid. I was more introverted, even though a lot of people would probably disagree knowing me. But it's true. I was very sensitive, very emotional. I was empathic. I could feel people's emotions and the world around me. And it was just like being an exposed nerve all the time. Like, oh, the wind's blowing. I feel so much. And, that's confusing as a human, much less a human boy smack dab in the middle of Hollywood and trying to make sense of the world around you. So I went into acting because I thought that was my way that I could connect with people and make a difference. I saw the way that fans would react to my sister, Tori Spelling. She was on a show called Beverly Hills 90210. It was uber famous in the 90s. It was
maybe a few people have watched it.
Right, a few. It was a craze in the 90s.
Yes.
And I would watch the way that people approached my father. His name was Aaron Spelling. He was a television producer, for those who don't know. And I watched people who otherwise would just pass by, right? We're walking on the street, but they would see him or her and, they'd get all giddy. And depending on how the interaction went, what they said to each other, I would watch their faces walking away. And because I was empathic, I could feel what they felt and the brightness that they felt. The connection that they felt, that they saw someone on TV, met them, but because of their conversation, they took something away that really touched them. I wanted that. I didn't know another way to go about that other than, oh, okay, I need to act to be famous, to be able to interact with people in that way.
Right.
So I went about it. I did a couple of my father's TV shows. I was on Beverly Hills 90210 as well. I did about 12 episodes. Did a whole bunch of other things. I dabbled in the music industry for a few years. And then I went back into acting, but I battled some personal demons and had no clue how to cope with those. So I turned to alcohol, which turned to drugs, which turned to me just putting anything that I could in my body to numb what I was feeling. And I don't say this lightly. It is kind of a miracle that I am alive. I came into this world 2 pounds, 14 ounces, 2.5 months premature, spent 2 months in an incubator in the hospital. And I went through that again in my mid-20s where my friends would bust open my door because I was passed out. They thought I was dead. Another one had to beat on my chest because my heart stopped in a lobby in Las Vegas. I woke up in an ambulance. I mean, there were many, many times that I probably should have died and somehow was spared. And to sort of give you the abridged version here, one night shortly after my father passed away, I was doing a reality show, which was everything that was against who I was, what I stood for. But this was, what to do in your career. So I did it. And I was just in the most pain I had ever been in. And it was about 3-4 in the morning. people left my apartment, and I fell to my knees, and I just was desperate. And I called on my dad. I called him Pops. I said, Pops, if you could hear me, God, angels, everybody, help me. I don't want to live like this anymore. I really feel that I'm here for a purpose and a reason. And little backstory, from about 18 to 22, I got deeply into meditation and metaphysics and psychology. So I was daily meditating and into that. And I had some really profound experiences, so much so that I actually knew what real connection to self felt like, and connection to something more, something greater. And I think that saved my life, because when I fell to my knees, I said, I want that. I don't know what to do, but help me. And 2-3 weeks later, through a series of events, it got worse, but through a series of events, I checked myself into rehab, and had a therapist there named Burton, who literally looked like Tim Burton with like the long ponytail hair. It was in Utah. Awesome. And I sort of like reconnected with my sense of spirituality. And someone suggested, months after, they were like, hey, have you ever thought of life coaching? And I was like, what? I didn't hear that term except on Oprah.
Right.
And I looked on the computer to find out what that was. And I said, this checks a lot of boxes. I'm going to enroll in a course. It was about a 1.5-year program, just to get these interpersonal skills and see if I even like it. And I started coaching people because that's what was suggested through it. And through coaching people, I realized this is what I was searching for. Now I could connect with people and make a difference in their lives and learn along the way as a student while I'm helping other people.
Oh, I love all of that. So part of what compels me about your story is, in a much smaller world, I kind of traveled a similar path. I spent years upon years upon years trying to make it as a musician. And then the day I played the biggest show I had ever played, it's in this amphitheater, opened up for some big name bands. I'm walking around this amphitheater. My kids were toddlers at the time. And I thought to myself, this is my Super Bowl moment. It's not going to get any better than this. Why don't I walk away and have that Jay-Z, the Black Album moment where I walk out on top and be proud of what I have accomplished and kind of veer my life in another direction. And I think there's a lot of power in that sense of self-actualization, no matter what the catalyst was to bring that on. Yes. And I am so happy for you that you have found this path through life coaching, because 10 years after I walked away from music, it's when I started this podcast, and I view it in a similar vein, like connection with the real world by exposing more of what we have in common, as opposed to highlighting all of our negative differences, not our good differences, but our negative differences, whether they be socio-political or what have you. So I love your story. And that was why I was really compelled to have you on the show.
Thank you. But I also love like that self-actualization moment that you talk about, where you were at, what you dreamed of for like, oh, this is that moment. And then it was, instead of chasing that, it was, what if I walk away and find something? And those moments can't be scripted, right? They happen when they happen, the right series of events. But I don't know. I feel like that's the cutting edge of science, or something that I want to break open, is what does it take to have those moments? Because those moments you will never forget. There's something about that experience that almost feels like you're observing yourself having the experience.
Yes, yes. And it has its own roller coaster effect as well, where you're having your own roller coaster of emotions. Did I make the right decision? But then you just trust and just have faith in yourself. And yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Man, this is awesome. So, as a parent, how do you delineate the childhood that you had with the childhood that your kids are having right now, given these perspectives that you've learned over the years?
There's a lot to unpack there.
Let's unpack it.
So, how do I delineate between the childhood that I had and the childhood that they are having now?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, a lot of people, when they ask me about my childhood, I don't know, maybe I don't know how you feel about this, but for me, it feels like a past life.
Yes.
Right. And maybe that was just all that I've been through and where I came from, because where I came from and how I grew up, most people would think that is the dream. You can't have any more than that. You have everything. You're running in really amazing circles and restaurants and just all the things that a lot of people
Right.
probably go, oh gosh, life would be so easy if you had that. And in some senses, sure, it was, and it was beautiful. But where do you go from there? Unless you have the type of success that my father had and create a life that is that big, that looks that way. My path was to find a life that was that big in here.
Yeah.
It's not devoid of outer success, but it is, if the money is not there, what is here that creates wealth? What is true abundance? And that is something that I've had to struggle with my whole life, because when you talk about wealth and abundance, I mean, we think about money and cash and gold bars and what, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah, Scrooge McDuck. Yeah.
Right? So for my kids and for me, I moved to Portland, and it wasn't that I just wanted a smaller life, if you will. I wanted to find me, and I wanted to find what lit me up. And I told you, I spent so long people pleasing and trying to fit into a world where I was just, fitting in. I was like, I didn't know myself. So Portland was my thing. So I moved here. And then in terms of raising a family, I get that. Does this feel right? Does this not feel right? And it felt like the right place to raise a family for me.
Right.
And then we got to holidays. And I have to say this, I love some of the traditions that my parents did with us. I take it with me in my heart, and we do some of those same traditions. But then I got to ask myself the question, what are we even teaching about holidays? What do we want to teach? Are we just going along with the norm because that's what's been done for 50 years, 100 years, our ancestors? What do we want to do? So just like we're asking these questions now at our age about time and all this, it's really being intentional with how we live. And we're not perfect. I'm not always intentional every moment of the day, but I really have strived to live a life where what I'm doing is on purpose.
When you consider your lineage and your exposure to pop culture, does it have, and pop culture in particular, does it have an influence in how you coach clients in your day-to-day life?
Does pop culture? Yeah, I think so. I can't say I'm up on all the pop culture because my daughters roll their eyes every time I try and say something Gen Z or
Right.
whatever the new generation is now. They're like, oh,
Do you ever do it on purpose just to make them
all
roll
the
their eyes?
time.
Me too, man.
All the time. I know I'm
Yeah.
doing it wrong, and somehow it gives me even more satisfaction when I get
Um,
that eye roll.
my wife will say, "Quit poking at them," because I'll just keep doing it.
I mean, these are the things that, get passed on, right? It just like, I don't
Yep.
understand that music.
Right. Right. And the reason I ask this question is being that we're of the same age, I think we grew up in a very unique time because the 90s in particular, that was like 3 different decades all in one decade. And society was very much influenced by pop culture, and there would be like these title shifts every 3 years, which would initiate this whole phase change in a person's personality. And I haven't seen, and maybe it's just because I came of age in the 90s and you came of age in the 90s, I haven't seen that replicated anywhere else. So I think of how pop culture influences my day-to-day interactions with people and even my own leadership skills. I do some stuff on as a day job where I lead people. I never say what I do on the podcast, but and I think about how that influences how I interact with people as well. It taught me a lot about social currency and how to play into what a person's motivations are, and what drives them, so to speak.
I admire you that you took so much from that decade in such a rich way, because to be honest, I don't think I took as much
Right.
from the decade, and even had the awareness of how the decade was shaping
Mm-hmm.
me. I was too focused maybe on me and whatever else was going on. And then I'm sure you've heard this before. In my early career of coaching, I worked with a lot of people in addiction. That wasn't my sole focus, but it
Sure.
just so happened because I went through it, people would come to me. And there's a saying that when you start to use a substance or drugs in a way that is abusing it in some way, you stunt yourself at that age emotionally.
Yeah.
And so I started drinking really at about 13. And while I don't think I was fully abusing it at 13, it was on the weekend, every other weekend or every. So I feel like a part of me got a little bit stunted there. And then when I really started, I would say late 90s / 2000, that's when I started abusing. So I wasn't making all the connections and awarenesses. I was just trying to like stay afloat.
When I was 12, my parents divorced. It was a huge traumatic experience. Mother abandoned my brothers and I. And the running joke was, as Michael's 12 going on 21.
You had to grow up fast.
Right. But when you talk about stunting your development, I feel like that kind of led to a duality in my personality where, yeah, there was this portion of me that was stunted. And then there's this other portion of me that was like, I have to be an adult. I'm always the kid that's going to be the adult in the room, whether I want to be or not. So I can definitely sympathize from that angular standpoint.
Do the two parts, did you have any trouble in reconnecting those two parts? Like, does one come out and play a lot more than the other?
It's weird because if just kind of taking my own armchair quarterback psychology analysis here, I think sometimes it manifests itself very similar to manic depression to a certain sense, where like I know when the 12-year-old's coming out to play, it's maybe I'm a little bit more manic than normal. I wouldn't say necessarily, and I am wholeheartedly all about people speaking openly about mental health struggles. But I would say the depressed side is more like me being serious and wanting to be down to business, down to business, down to
Yeah.
business. So I don't know that one comes out to play more than others, but I can definitely recognize it and, address it and bring myself back into the lane where it's a little bit more balanced, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Talking about finding meditation and, just that state of being and that state of hyper awareness, that is something that I've been very intentional with, being in my thoughts, understanding how to unplug and bring things back into balance for sure.
I think that's where it's at. I mean, we are in a time, especially with technology,
Yes.
where it's happening so quickly and so fast. And I mean, I'm reading all these things, not to make, all technology bad, but like the doom scroll and what effect it is actually having on the brain.
Right.
And I think I read something in 2024, it was gaslighting a few years ago. This year, it is like brain rot or something like that due to technology. It came out of Oxford, and I was thinking, wow, that we are at a time where the most searched term is brain rot.
Yep.
So I don't know about you, but I feel like we're in a fight
I agree.
to find these type of nutrients, and those nutrients are how to feel centered and grounded, how to ask yourself questions instead of just resorting to Google or AI. Or like I saw, kids, what should I wear tomorrow? And that's how they're growing up, is that you just resort to an outer source to give you the answer, which I think in some ways is very cool, that they might never have to write an official business plan because it could be done for you in 45 seconds.
Right.
But you have to get really smart in a different way. Is then you have to almost reverse engineer it to go, what is the actual outcome that I want? And then you have to ask the questions according to the outcome you want. To me, it seems right now we have to ask ourselves these questions from reverse engineering. What is it that we actually want from our lives? And then looking at what are the questions to ask to get me there?
Again, there are two sides to the same coin. You look at the socio-political divide that our world is in right now, and you wonder if that's just social media, online connectivity, constantly the doom scrolling, the engagement, if that hasn't just been gas to a fire, as opposed to, a fire that could have been easily extinguished. I don't remember any other point in my lifetime, and maybe it's just because I didn't pay enough attention to it when I was younger, where things didn't seem so doomsday scenario like they do now. Like
Yes.
just day-to-day things.
It feels like that, not only collectively, but then through media, social media.
Yes.
It's like, are we at a nuclear war point? Are we, are we going to fall off a cliff? I mean, what is going to happen? And part of that, this is what I'm saying. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but I do feel that it is so important to find these ways of asking ourselves these questions. Like, I wish I had this conversation years and years and years ago.
Right.
I wish that even, we innocently started talking about time and how we engage with time. That alone, like looking at mortality and looking at, we think we're at the midway point and we're laughing about midlife and oldish and all of this. The truth is, we don't know if we have 2 more weeks before something happens. So we always play out that, like, oh, let's not take time for granted. And you have the platitude of, let's not waste time. Let's be good to each other. Let's be kind, put good stuff out in the world. But really, if you lived closer to death, thinking that basically your life is on hospice, but you can breathe and you're healthy. What do you want to do with that time? We all would probably be living pretty differently.
Well, that's a good segue into this next portion. I want to talk about creating a positive narrative, which is something that I really ambitiously try to do through Caught on the Mic, and something that I feel that you guys do really well with Oldish.
Thank you.
Could you explain to my audience the concept behind Oldish and kind of how it came together?
Sure. So the concept behind Oldish was really in the vein of Loveline, which was a show with Adam Carolla and Dr. Drew. I listened to it. It was in the 80s, back when radio was, big entertainment.
Right.
And there was this talk show, and it was literally Adam Carolla, who was kind of a comedian, funny, blunt guy. And then you had Dr. Drew, who somehow seemed to know everything about everything. And kids would call in for advice, whether it was relationship advice or sex advice, or, whether it was erectile dysfunction or, you name it.
Right.
And they talked about this. But the funny thing is the mix of Adam Carolla, which there was humor, there was entertainment, but they held a container in a space that was safe enough for people to call in and get advice and feel okay doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that, and I liked it. So Brian Austin Green, who hosts it with me, as well as Sharna Burgess. Brian, we reconnected somehow on Instagram, and we traded a couple messages after years. And I guess as the algorithm goes, my videos were popping up in his feed. And I think, if I remember this correctly, it was late at night and he was in the bathroom or something, and he was watching some of my videos. And he sent me a message the next day, and he said, "Hey man, I have this idea. I want to do a podcast that is really positive in nature, kind of in the vein of Loveline. And, you could be the Dr. Drew character." He's like, I've been watching your videos and they're so positive and I feel so good. And this is what I want to do. And I've been approached by a bunch of people to do podcasts, but it just didn't feel right. And for some reason, when I asked, I got hey, this is a maybe. So I said, yeah, let's talk. And we talked and developed the concept a little bit more. The show has morphed a little bit from the idea of Loveline. When we first started, we were literally taking live callers. It's so hard to do in a podcast platform that it just became too hard. Unless it is live radio, it's too hard. So we moved away from that, but the idea stuck is let's create this space where we could talk about all of these things that help us to ask questions, to answer questions, to live life from a deeper, richer, more meaningful way. And since we are all in this realm, I mean, he's 51, I'm 46. Sharna, I believe, is in her late 30s. So we're all kind of in this realm of this is when you start to ask these questions and you start to look at life differently. So we want to talk about relationships and communication and what you're getting, what you're not getting, how to have those conversations. We want to talk about sex and sexless marriages and what to do if. And we want to talk about how to have conversations, even if you're on one side and I'm on the other. And that was big for us, is how do we bridge this gap to bring people something positive, have some fun doing it, but bring them information in a way that, is meaningful. And Oldish was born.
One of the things that you guys do well that checks off a big mark on the is this podcast listenable checklist for me.
What's that?
Is you guys have interjected yourselves into the narrative, whether you have a guest or not, especially with your Life Lately episodes, to where people become invested in you and get to see your life experiences that they can correlate their experiences to. Like, you guys have talked about everything from parenting to liver health to human trafficking to having Freddie Prinze Jr. on and the Lawrence brothers on, and your sister's done a fantastic 2-part episode. So I really love that about your show. And I think the great thing about podcasting, at least it has been for me, is the opportunity to learn about yourself through these great conversations that you have with these guests.
Yes, I've learned so much by doing this podcast. Sounds like you have as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Right? Yeah, we talk about this all the time on the podcast, and I reference the podcast not because I just want to talk about this podcast that I'm doing.
Right.
I reference it because when you spend your time, just like work or anything else, doing something, but then you get a takeaway, you get a different perspective, you learn and grow, you want to share that. And it's been an amazing eye-opener for me to do research on someone, to do a deep dive into what they are interested in and talking about in their life and trajectory. And like we said with AI, then figure out what questions to ask that not only am I interested in, but what would be interesting for the listener, how to take them on a journey. And it's been deeply insightful for me.
Yes. And I think the configuration of guests or hosts is absolutely perfect. Like, can Brian be any more of a down-to-earth dude?
He's totally a down-to-earth dude. He's just such a likable guy.
Oh my gosh. So when my wife, I recorded with Brian a few months back, my wife was super excited, and we watched that episode, and she was like, I would have thought that you guys grew up together, just the way that you guys interacted with each other. And I go, that's just who he is. And I think it translates really well through your guys' show.
I'm so glad to hear that. That is how he is. I mean, he has the ability to make you feel like you're his best friend and you've known each other for a while. And I mean, he has that way of like bringing people in,
yes,
which is really nice. And I'll tell you, having recorded season 1 over Zoom only, because I'm in Portland, they're in LA.
Right.
Now that we're almost done with season 2 and we've done it all in person, there's such a difference. And I do a lot of podcasts on Zoom. There's such a difference of sitting down with someone to be in their energy and share space together. And I've really enjoyed that aspect, not only to sit with Brian and Sharna, but to then bring a guest in and to feel how that dynamic is created in person.
Right. Yes. It's the difference between text messaging or just making a phone call.
It's so different. It's so, and truthfully, I resist a lot of times in person. I'm like, hey, we can just do a Zoom meeting, easy, versus meet for coffee. But I'm just reminded that when you're in front of people, even if it's uncomfortable because you sort of have the screen as protection, there's something to it.
If you had to pick one, and I know this is going to be like asking you to pick a favorite child, but do you have a personal favorite episode that you've done thus far?
Okay, I'm gonna choose a couple here.
Okay, yeah.
One was the first season. We had someone named Miss Jaya on, who was a sexologist. I actually love the other sexologist that we had on named Rebecca Alvarez. Different personalities, but I'm thinking of Miss Jaya because she has these I forget what it's called, but it's like the 5 personalities of arousal or something, right? And you get to take a test to see what category you fall into. So I took the test and I said, hey, Brian, Sharna, be great if you guys could take the test. So we're texting back and forth, and the text thread was just hilarious. We get on and we are all 3 blushing at different points. And Brian is like, I'm so interested in Randy's personality. What did he get? And we're going through this, and just the look on our faces as we're going through that episode, because it's the first time we've really done that type of episode.
Right.
Was hilarious. But I will tell you, we learned so much from this subject that we were all blushing about and, we're kind of laughing at, but it hit home. It was like, whoa, this is a taboo subject that feels uncomfortable, yet we're being really vulnerable and sharing our personalities on here. And I'm learning a lot. So it was that was a good one.
Oh, fantastic.
The,
Fantastic.
and another one, the sex trafficking one,
The recent one
I
with
would say
Pornhub
was
and
the
such.
most, yeah, that was the most uncomfortable,
Right.
but I loved it because what I really want to do through this podcast is to have conversations like this. They don't all have to be sort of like dark and skewed, but the thing is it's happening. So to bring these things to light, and again, to have these conversations that aren't being had and bring it out into the open, I think is very purposeful. So if I had my druthers, I would do more things in the realm of, because we're giving everyone a buffet here of like different food things and different parenting things, but I want to, I have some ideas of places I want to go on here that leaves no stone unturned.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you next is, where do you want to go with the show overall? What excites you about the show moving forward?
I want to get more into existential. I don't want to be afraid to really delve into different spiritual modalities or, things that I feel can really improve people's lives. I don't think that everyone has to subscribe to a faith or a spiritual slant or whatever, but I want to be able to talk like crystals, for instance. I remember posting a picture of a crystal a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, and I had mainly positive comments, but I had this one woman who just came at me. And like, I just happen to like crystals, right? People like flowers, but she was like, that's hocus pocus. There's no validity whatsoever and blah, blah, blah. And there's no power in crystals. And normally I don't respond. I'm like, okay, you believe whatever you want to believe. But on this day, it just hit me at the right time and the right space. And I wrote 2 books back. And I just started citing all the places that crystal chips are used in, from computers to phones to amplify sound to amplify. And, and then I got into more of the, I would say, where spiritual meets science, and how I had a 4-hour conversation from a guy in California who bought the biggest supply of optical calcite, I believe it was, because they would use this in radios in the war. And we had a conversation because I was asking him sort of all these metaphysical questions, and he said, I don't go there. I'm not that type of crystal guy. But he said, here's what I know to be true. I'm into the science, and here's what I know to be true. And he held up a crystal and he said, the energy that is contained within this crystal can power a ship, could probably likely power a city. He said, when the atoms are so tightly bound, if you were to be able to unstructure that and harness it, it has the potential to power more than you and I could even think of. And to me, I thought, that's really cool. I want to talk about that because whether it's anecdotal, whether people have a placebo effect from crystals or not, give people the option to explore. Just like food, we have varied nutritional experts on, and some people are gonna say seed oils are terrible, you should never do this, and here's how to biohack, and some people are gonna go, actually the science doesn't quite show that. We're not meaning to confuse people. What I want to do is give you enough information to start to go, wait a second, people are saying this and people are saying that. People are red, people are blue, right? People are this and that. What questions do I have to start asking to find what's right for me? And if we can achieve that in any way, shape, or form through the show, mission complete.
Yes. I love that approach, and I'm looking forward to episodes along those lines. I know I've taken some big risks with my own show. I've had a couple of psychics, some paranormal experts on, and like a lot of stuff people do say, that's hocus pocus, that's this, that's that, and the other thing. And I kind of have this mode of neutrality within myself as far as spirituality goes, where I say science can explain the how, but spirituality maybe explains the why. And that's why you can't shut it all off. Maybe give it a little bit of a chance, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Man, Randy, this has been a fantastic conversation. I am so glad we're linked up. I'm glad to call you a friend.
Likewise. I'm so glad that you reached out and we were able to make it happen and sit down together.
Yes. So with everything that you've experienced, and if you were given the opportunity to summarize it, what's your advice for making the world a better place tomorrow than what it is today?
I would say make your world a better place today. I think looking at the world and how to make the world better feels so overwhelming to people when they are treading water, maybe. So looking at one small thought that you can have that is different, one small action, maybe it's going to bed earlier so you can feel more rested tomorrow. But I promise you this, in my 17 years of coaching people, I have seen ripple effects that have been beyond my comprehension. And it all starts from small steps and daily actions that equal big results. Small, one thing. Start with that one thing. And I promise you, if you show up just a little bit better tomorrow, then the people around you get a better you. Then your thought process starts to change so that you can think differently and look at things differently. And maybe, like you said, have some of those awareness moments that then change everything.
Oh man, 154 episodes. I am not lying. I am not shining ass here. I am being 100% honest. 154 episodes. I have asked that question 154 times. That was my most favorite answer.
Really?
It's the exact answer that I would give. I call it the oxygen mask theory. The oxygen mask in the airplane. They tell you to put it on yourself before you put it on the kids and try and save anybody else. So it's perfect.
And still, after years of people hearing that, like, yes, put the oxygen mask on, there's so much truth to it. And then everyone's like, but that's selfish. And it's not selfish if something makes you better, because the more capacity you have, the less overwhelmed, the less anxious, the less stressed you are, the more you can give.
Yes. Man, why don't you tell all of my listeners, viewers, where they can find you online, my friend?
Okay, online, my website, randyspelling.com. I'm active on Instagram, and that is also Randy Spelling, and some other social platforms. But, I'm sure just look me up and you can find me. Always down to do this with you. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for asking me. I'm honored.
Oh man, this was awesome. And everybody that's watching or listening, make sure you check out Randy, Brian, and Sharna on Oldish weekly on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform. Like Randy just said, they're wrapping up season 2, and I am so excited to see where the show goes for season 3. Randy Spelling,
thank you.
Thank you for doing the show. The world's a much better place with you in it, my friend.
Oh, and you too. Thank you.